A very warm welcome to the World of Lord Russell podcast show. And today's show is called Making Words Dance, which captures a life of a ghostwriter with many autobiographies on behalf of some great storytellers, which includes, amongst others, Keith Deller, Jeremy Goss, and of course my good self with my autobiography, My Way, plus working within the broadcast business and as a professional blogger. Yes, folks, it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the show Edward Couzens-Lake. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thanks, Russell. That's the best introduction I've ever had. Thank you.
I'm sure there'll be more as well as you go through life.
Well, let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Yeah, I could do one or two myself, actually. But let's start by talking about events of 2023, Ed. I remember we did a podcast in early January this year, and it was a great podcast too. And then days later, you fell critically ill. What happened, Ed?
It was a rum old time, as we say in Norfolk. Soon after we did the podcast, and it was a good one, I headed up to Norfolk. I hadn't been feeling particularly well. I'd had COVID over Christmas, so I just sort of wrote it off as being a hangover of that. Got to my mum's, felt just awful. Said to her, I'm going to bed, I'm going to have an early night, I'll be fine in the morning. The next thing I remember is waking up on the third step, looking up at her, and she said, I'm calling an ambulance.
Oh.
And I said, no, I'm all right. I'm just tired, because that's what I'm like. Don't make a fuss, I'm all right.
Well, you're a man as well.
I'm a man, a pathetic man. And she got an ambulance. They rushed me into QE Hospital in King's Lynn, which I have nothing but the utmost praise and respect for. And I ended up being diagnosed with pneumonia and sepsis and thrombosis as well.
Oh, crikey, 3 nasties all in one shot.
Yeah, all at once. Yeah, I had doctors coming around to see me. You're the one with the 3 different conditions, aren't you?
You're the rare one that's in here. We don't see you very often. My God, I mean, just having one of those is a bad critical illness. I mean, sepsis on its own is a disaster.
Yeah.
3 like that. Well, good heavens.
In combination with pneumonia, it's not good news. And obviously they had to intubate me for about 5 days. And it got a bit scary for a while. But, I was lucky.
You was in intensive care for what, 9, 10 weeks?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I don't like to think about it now. I was trying to recall some of the things that happened only yesterday.
Yes.
And so much of it has gone from my mind. And it's almost like, your mind magnolias over nasty things, doesn't it? So you don't think about them.
Yeah, indeed. Of course.
It doesn't seem like that long. It just seems like I was there for a couple of weeks. But of course, it was in actuality nearly 2 months.
Yeah, which is absolutely horrendous. And of course, you were also on a ventilator. I mean, ventilators obviously are there for a reason. But, I know through COVID and all the chat through COVID times that if you get put on a ventilator, you've got a 50-50 chance. That's awful.
Yeah. I mean, I was put on a ventilator. One of the things it did was wreck my voice, because they don't mess about when they put it down you, so it mucks up your vocal cords. My voice is recovering slowly. And it's almost a last resort. They put me on the ventilator. I only know this from the notes now. If I wasn't going to respond on the ventilator, they were going to give me a tracheotomy. Luckily, I didn't go that far. But later on, when I was on the ward, I saw somebody on the ventilator. I thought, crikey, that was me like a couple of weeks ago. That looked scary. And
it is scary. That's really, really worrying times. But you've come out. You're fighting fit, getting back to being your normal self again. Exercises, walking every day. Your voice is certainly back, because the voice is your work, isn't it? Really, you without your voice, you're stumbled really in many ways.
Yeah, I do lots of radio work and voice work and all that. So that was a worry for me. And definitely. I was saying all the time to the doctors, will I get my voice back? Will I get my voice back? Except at the time I was like, I could barely speak, and they reassured me. And yeah, it's recovering.
Yeah, and of course this show is called Dancing with Words. So so as a renowned writer, you've written many books and autobiographies. Obviously, the best production was My Way by yours truly.
Unquestionably, yes.
I've got to say that. But you've also had some other great individuals to focus on too, such as Jeremy Goss, the former Norwich City icon, and Keith Deller, the former world darts champion. So, Ed, tell us a little about these autobiographies and how they came about. Obviously, I introduced you to Keith, didn't I? But yeah, fantastic.
You did. I mean, it's a terrible cliche. I really am a people person.
Yes.
Genuinely so. I love the company of people. I don't particularly like being in large groups of 10 to 12 people. Get me in a group of 4 to 6. I'm in my element.
Wonderful.
And it started really many, many years ago, not long after I graduated. I worked as a recruitment consultant.
Mm.
And you've got to be a people person if you're working recruitment. You just have to be.
You have to be.
And that's where I discovered I liked talking to people and just being in their company and not being a lone wolf. To a certain extent, as a writer, you do spend a lot of time on your own. So I lap it up when I'm with people. And I think it all comes from my time working for Hayes. I'll give them
Hayes Recruitment. Yeah, I know Hayes.
Yeah, as a consultant. So although I wasn't tremendously good at the job, because there's an element of sales involved in recruitment, and I'm not that sort of person who's driven by that kind of thing. I loved the social side of it and the being with people. And that worked very well when I decided to pack it all in and become a writer after another serious illness some years ago. I think, I really want to tell people their life stories. And it all started with a lady in the Cotswolds whose life story I told, and transfigured onto Jeremy Goss, which combined my love of Norwich and football.
Yes.
And Gossy, who was just, people who have met him just know he's just the loveliest, most modest person.
He is.
And the words just flowed, and it was an absolute delight to do his book with him.
Yeah, because when I last spoke to Jeremy, we were talking about doing some charity work together. This was at Carrow Road when I had a chat with him. And of course, COVID then came along, and that was the end of that. But because he loves his charity work, doesn't he, Jeremy?
He does. I mean, he worked for the NNAB in Norwich, the Norfolk and Norwich Association of the Blind. He's currently with Age UK. He's just jumped out of an aeroplane with them and done a tandem jump.
I've seen that.
Age, you've got to do this. That's all right. You carry on.
Do you know what? There's one thing I would never do, and that's jump out of an aeroplane. I've done many crazy things in my life, as you know, Ed, because you wrote my book. Wrote my book. But jumping out of an aircraft is a no-no. I suffer with vertigo anyway, so there's just no way.
It would be with me. And interestingly, this leads on to another person whose life story I'm speaking. His name is Steve. He's a former Red Arrow.
Yes.
Amongst other things. He found out not long ago that I've never flown in my life.
Yes.
And he said, right, I'm taking you up. So my first flight will be in a light aircraft with a former Red Arrow, and we're going to make a film about it.
Well, that's brilliant, isn't it? You're going to have to do a podcast on that, aren't you, really, I guess?
Definitely.
Do it live from the ground.
I'm bricking it, but I thought, as I've been close to death a few times this year, what's going to hurt me if I drop in an aeroplane?
Well, actually, let's face it, you can't fear anything now, can you? Because you've had the worst. You really were on the brink, weren't you? Let's be honest. And to go up an aircraft with a Red Arrow's pilot, well, why not?
Yeah, I fancy my chances of getting back to Earth again, put it that way. Yeah,
you'll be back down on the terra firma fairly quickly, I'm sure. But as long as you haven't got to put the parachute on and jump out, you'll be okay.
Well, plus the fact he doesn't, suddenly remember he's a Red Arrow and do a loop or anything like that, it should be fine.
Oh, a bit like I did over Duxford that time in that T6 Harbour.
In the Harvard,
that was fun. Anyway, recent projects have covered a Norfolk road, Britain's forbidden places, the Cold War, a man who defused the Argentinian missiles that hit British ships during the Falklands War in 1982.
Yeah.
And the life story of a man who spent much of his life with undiagnosed ADHD. A very rich array of topics there, isn't it? The writing skills for those levels of topics is amazing.
Well, I don't want to be typecast. When people say to me, what do you write about? I say anything. And genuinely, I can write about just about anything. I've written about fashion. I did the book with Tim McWilliam about ADHD. The guy who was in the Falkland Islands doing bomb disposal, his name is Mick Fellows. He is extraordinary.
Yes.
We went through this tale of him being on one of the ships in the Falklands. There was a bomb there, an Argentinian bomb off an aircraft. It hit the ship, gone through the ship, ended up lodged in the heads on the ship. And he had to defuse it. And he talked about defusing it as if he was building something out of Lego. Just the most extraordinary guy. And I went, I used to meet him and sit in his study with him. And in his study, there's paraphernalia from his bomb disposal days. So he'd hand me something and say, what do you think that is? And I said, well, I don't know, Mick, it's just a glass vial. It looks a bit like a light bulb. Oh, he said, well, that used to have anthrax in it. you know.
What an incredible person.
And that's why I love doing Ghostwriter, because the people you meet are just amazing. They don't have to be household names, but their stories. I have a big story, you know all about it. Everybody has a story to tell.
Yes.
And it's so true. Everyone. People say to me, oh, I've done nothing. Yes, you have. Whoever you are, you have done something. And we need to get people's stories down.
We do. And, I think everybody, it's fair to say, does have a book in them. They don't know it. And it's when you sit down and start to sort of regurgitate, if the word's right, your life stories and what you've done, you think, hold on a minute, that's an awful lot there. And the more you go into it, you think, yeah, I could write a book, so everybody can. So let's try and push people to write a book, because that's good. It's good for yourself. I was trying to get Teddy Maybank to get in touch as well to see, because he was interested. I'll get in touch with him after this podcast show, in fact. To try and
I mean, what the time he was in the game, the 70s and the 80s, which is my favourite periods of football.
Yes.
And the characters, and Chelsea, they were still the kings of the King's Road, but they weren't very good.
That's
Ken
right.
Bates, the people he played with, what a fabulous story, like the old podcast of Alan Hudson.
Yes.
Such a great character,
Oh, incredible.
But they've all got a story. Everybody has a story. I can't reiterate that strongly enough.
Ken Bates is an interesting man, isn't he? Well, I'd like to get him on this show, actually. You never know. It might happen.
You'd
fantastic.
About your weekend.
Oh, certainly would. I mean, that'd be a whole day's podcast, I think. The stories and things he's done in his life. Quite brilliant. But buying Chelsea for £1 and then buying the property outside so the bulldozers couldn't come in, to save the football club. Quite an extraordinary man. But, they're the people you meet in life, Ed, aren't they? You walk through the streets and you bump into people. They've all got an amazing story of some kind, as you quite rightly say.
Well, one of the early autobiographies I did was for a lady who lives in Emsworth, which is in Hampshire. Her name was Joyce Spencer. She just looks like a little old lady, a typical little old lady. She was a nurse in Portsmouth during the Second World War, working during the Blitz, driving an ambulance while Portsmouth was being bombed.
Incredible.
And she said, oh, well, the hospital I was working at, and I think it was Queen Alexandra Hospital in Portsmouth, she said a German bomb dropped on it. It didn't go off. It just landed in a hospital corridor. So they just put some tape around it and we carried on walking around this bomb.
Unbelievable. I mean, that just wouldn't happen today, would it? With health and safety and all this kind of stuff that goes on in the world. You just couldn't do that in these days. It's a different world now. Yeah.
You coax these stories out of people. And I looked at it, I thought, you are just the most amazing person of the things you've done in your life. And I'm very proud of her book. It's a lovely, lovely book, and it did very well locally.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. You also recently finished a book covering the history of a very popular and, in your words, and sometimes controversial fashion item. I'm intrigued, Ed, and so will our listeners. What is this fashion item?
I am not at liberty to say at the moment, I'm afraid. The book is in the process of being proofread and ready for publication.
Yes.
What I will say, it's an item of underwear.
Okay. Oh, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? How do you write a book about underwear?
Well, that's what I said when I was asked, will you write a book about the history of this garment? And of course I said, yes, of course you do.
Yes.
And then thought, all right, okay, what am I going to do here? And I started doing some research. Now, for me, one of the joys of writing is the research that's involved. And I found that the social history and connections of this clothing and things related to it was absolutely fascinating. So I went with it, and the book became an utter joy to write. It really did. And as soon as it comes out, I'll send you a couple of copies and you can give one away.
Wonderful stuff. I look forward to that. And I'd be intrigued. Is it going to be is it a big book? I mean, how much can you write about an item of underwear? That's what I'm intrigued about.
Oh, about 70,000 words.
Oh, wow. So it's quite, crikey, it's some book then, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I suppose when you do the research and you go out and do your Googling and all the consulting around such subjects, you'd probably be surprised how much information you can find, which I'm sure is what happened here.
I think, for any writer, the internet has been such a boon in terms of doing research. You're not doomed to spend your time in libraries now. I do go to libraries because I love books.
Yes.
But there's always Google. Some of the sources are unreliable. I always check things out 2 or 3 times before I decide that it's gospel, but it does make your work easier. The AI coming in now, I suspect that will not replace writers. People have said to me, you're going to be made redundant by AI. No, we're not.
No, definitely
Because a
not.
good writer writes with their heart,
Yes,
and AI doesn't have a heart. It's cold, it's emotionless, it's
exactly.
illogical. It can't replicate what we do.
Well, it's just the same as saying a robot can become a human being. No, they can't. They don't have the emotion, the feeling, that spirit within that makes us all as individuals, and and that's what makes us individuals, isn't it? At the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's going to be a great. I think AI is good for the world, and certainly helpful, very helpful for your industry as well, profession, Ed, writing books.
And it can be gloriously inaccurate. Obviously, one of the things you always do on Google is you put your own name in to see what's been said about you. And I got up an AI app, the Google one actually, and said, "Tell me all about Edward Couzens-Lake." And some of the things I've done, I never knew I've done them.
Well, it just goes to show, doesn't it? Really, the way it is these days.
I've been a guest on the Question of Sport, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't remember that.
No,
but that's the flaw. That's the flaw of AI.
Exactly.
It doesn't get things right. It uses logic, and it decided I've done this thing and I haven't.
No. Probably tell me I was once the king of Spain or something, which is untrue too. But yeah, it's just how does it actually really know who you are? I mean, it's obviously a name. Yeah. Well, there's many Edwards in the world. Probably not too many Edward Couzens-Lake, but no, maybe it just picks up on Ed Cousins and does a check on that one. So
exactly,
there are flaws. I mean, you're currently working with, amongst others, 2 ex-members of the RAF aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, which you very kindly mentioned earlier on as well, albeit 2 very different stories, and a book that chronicles the early years of a world-famous footballer. Another intriguing book. So I have to ask, who is the world-famous footballer, Ed?
Well, again, I'm legally obliged not to tell you, I'm afraid.
I was going to say, you must invite him onto the podcast show.
Yeah, he is. He is extremely well known, world famous, played in World Cups. But it's not about his current career, it's about his childhood and his growing up and becoming a footballer. It's fascinating stuff. And I'm working with a Dutch chap on it, and I think it will be a big success when it comes out.
Oh, wow, that sounds absolutely amazing. And when's it due to be published?
I would hope by the end of the year. It depends how quickly I get myself into gear and get it finished. But we would hope to have it out by the end of the year.
Well, probably a Christmas release, would it be? Do you think?
Possibly. Or for the spring market. One straight to the London Book Fair, possibly, which you know well.
Yes, of course. We went there last year together, didn't we?
We did.
And that was an interesting show, which changed from the previous years, I understand, because we couldn't get in with the people we wanted to speak to, could we? So easily.
No, and I spoke to somebody who I know who went this year. Obviously, I couldn't because I was in hospital.
Yes.
And he said it was just impossible getting to sit down and speak to people. It never used to be like that at the London Book Fair.
That's a shame.
You could picture ideas to publishers, they'd give you time.
Yeah.
It's lost that certain human touch to it, which is a pity. But I think they're looking to bring that back to next year, and I hope they do.
Well, I hope so too, because I'm sure there's been 1 or 2 complaints about that as well, because it seems to me they're just trying to monetize everything. You've got to pay for these certain slots now to meet certain people. Instead, just walking around, and bumping into someone and having a chat, just walking onto a stand and speaking to someone that's got a bit of fame and fortune to help you out with your book writing or selling your book, marketing your book. I was hoping to do that last year, but, didn't.
Well, I got to do it in 2019. I went there with a manuscript for the book about the Cold War, a guy who was a submariner in the Cold War. Mick Fellows, not Mick Fellows, somebody else. Sorry, I've got confused. But a guy called Tony, he was a submariner in the Cold War, and I just went up to a publisher and said, "Look, I've got this great book. I dare you do the military books. What about it?" And I got a book deal out of it, and that was a joy of the London Book Fair.
Yeah, and that's wonderful when that happens. But we didn't experience that last year, did we? And as I say, it looks like it's the same this year. I hope they change. Maybe we can go back down next year together.
Yeah,
see.
And I'd recommend the event to anybody if you love books.
Yes,
of course, it's glorious. It just needs to have that personal touch back again.
It does, yeah. Because as human beings, we need that personal touch. But I think that's the trouble with today's society. It's particularly since COVID, that personal touch across all professions and businesses seems to be getting lost somewhere. Yeah, it's all messages and emails, and no one answers the phone.
A lot of the face-to-face element of things is gone. It's difficult for me because I couldn't get together with clients, so we use Zoom. I mean, we're doing this meeting on Zoom.
We are.
Zoom is fantastic, but I would far rather be sat with you having a nice coffee somewhere and chatting than doing this on Zoom.
Absolutely, yeah. We can sat down, microphones and on and so on, and do a nice interactive show. That'd be perfect. Face to face. Well, we'll try it out one day, Ed.
Well,
We'll give it a go. We'll sort one
we're
out.
being encouraged as a species to be much more insular,
Yes.
I think, and I won't get political about it, but we're being encouraged to withdraw into ourselves as people, as a nation, and it's not healthy.
No, it's not healthy, not at all. Well, I've got this new camera now, which is great for filming, great for making films, videos. So we could even do a visual one as well. We're looking at that.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the ones I'm going to be doing is a visual record of my book A149 Landmarks, which is about the road that sits on top of the Norfolk coast. There's some fantastic sites along there, and I think that would really suit a visual blog of some kind.
Yeah, no, definitely. I quite agree. So what other books have you got planned as future projects, Ed? You know, talking about the ones you're doing at the moment. Any more lined up for next year with some interesting characters?
There's a few. Again, I can't mention some because until the contract's signed and sealed, you don't. But I am writing a book about the history of goalkeeping at the moment.
Right. Wonderful.
Which will be out next year. Lots of goalkeeping celebrities in there, including some that you might not have heard of, but were very significant towards the development of the game. Fatty Fulk, for example, ex-Chelsea, of course, back in the day.
Oh, a big bloke, wasn't he?
A big lad, shall we say.
6'8", and also about 6 foot wide. Huge.
Wasn't unknown for him to lay out an opposing centre forward. You were allowed to do it in those days, but there were many aspects of his game which broke through into the modern game if you make the connection. And that's going to interest people, I think.
And of course, my next guest on the show, Brian King, ex-goalkeeper for Millwall. That's going to be an interesting show, and probably somebody you could talk to as well to help with that book,
Definitely. And I was thinking about Brian King. He was a great goalkeeper at a time when England in particular had so many good goalkeepers. Gordon Banks, Peter Thornton, Peter Bonetti, Phil Parkes and Phil Parkes. There were two of them. Alex Stepney at Manchester United. The list goes on and on.
And Brian King was called up by South Ramsey
for a game against Portugal. England, I believe he was on the bench. Yes, he deserved that because he was a good goalkeeper.
He was. But you also have a radio show too on Flash FM down in Waterlooville in Hampshire, Ed. I think it's called Flash FM. How long have you been on the airwaves with Flash FM?
Several years now. I mean, like lots of people that work in radio, I started in hospital broadcasting. Because the education you get there is second to none. Because most hospital radio stations will feature people who have worked in radio professionally.
Yes.
In the past, and Chichester Hospital Radio is no different to that. I learned, and I'm continuing to learn under a chap by the name of Peter Prue, who was a radio professional, and he's taught me so much. And I love radio. Again, it's a very, very personal medium.
It is.
Given the choice between doing radio and television, I do radio every single time because you have that connection with the listener.
You do. Yeah, I've been on one or two shows myself over the years, and I've always enjoyed being in the radio studios. And, you have a cup of coffee, a plate of biscuits, nice microphone in front of you. You just sit around and you just chat, don't you? It's wonderful.
Yeah, I've done that on Radio Norfolk with people like, Chris Gorham and Rob Butler, and it's just a lovely, lovely atmosphere, and it's so enjoyable. Yeah,
I've been in the same Radio Norfolk with the same guys as well over the years, talking about darts usually. And, of course, also BBC Radio Suffolk. I used to get invited onto the non-league show, which is an hour show every Thursday evening. And that was great fun, going in there.
Where else you get the chance to talk about non-league football on the radio? Don't.
And I love non-league football, as you know. It's a passion of mine. It really is. And it's just a great game. It's where football is, really, at the moment. If someone said to me, what do you want to go and watch Chelsea play, Manchester United, whatever, Tottenham, or Aldershot, or another non-league side, I think you know where my heart would be. I'd be down at Aldershot or some other non-league club, because that to me is the grassroots. It's the base level of football. And sadly, it's not looked after by the FA or anybody else, really.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, I remember going to watch Chertsey Town play in the Surrey League or something like that. And it was great. It was a wonderful day of football. You stood where you wanted. You got a burger at half time.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, I went to a match there as well at Chertsey. It was Deodora League Division 2 back in the day. It would have been about 1993, 94. And it was Chertsey Town versus Aldershot, top of the table clash. The ground was packed, absolutely rammed, thousands of people. The atmosphere was incredible, absolutely incredible. And that's it. It's the beauty of football, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think Chertsey won 3-2, actually, which wasn't
They
good.
won the FA Vase a couple of years ago, Chertsey at Wembley. So
they did.
What a day that was for them.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic, absolutely fantastic day. So that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? Really, but you don't do sport on Flash FM, do you? It's more sort
No,
of rock
we
or
play
something.
we play sort of music from the 60s and 70s. It's very much a rock orientated station. So
Yes,
if your thing is Queen, Dire Straits, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Hawkwind, Focus, King Crimson, Genesis, etc., that's the station for you. They have presenters who will do shows on soul music.
yes,
There are some that do shows on ska. So it's really album music from album music, not pop music.
yes.
And it's great to do, and we have a very interactive audience, and it's good fun.
Absolutely. And are you back in the studios now, or do you still do it from home?
Working to getting my voice back. I would have to be back very soon.
Well, your voice is certainly sounding a lot better now, Ed. Obviously, when you came out, it was a struggle, wasn't it? I can remember.
It was a squeak, yes.
It was. And I was a bit worried. I thought, my God, your voice is you. It's Ed Couzens-Lake, all the voiceovers you do and other work with voice, like podcasts and radio. To lose that would have been an absolute death nail, wouldn't it, for you, really? But it's coming back. You sound an awful lot better, which is brilliant.
Yeah. I'm very optimistic.
Well done. That's fantastic. And you're going to stick with Flash FM? You're going to carry on there and not got any desires to go to any other stations?
No, as long as they want me, I will be there for them. But you're always looking for other opportunities in radio. You need to do something a bit different, something that might involve a bit more talk, might involve having guests in the studio. I was in touch with somebody from British Forces Radio a little while ago. That's something I'd like to look into.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'd like a radio show as well. Even in my later years in life, it'd be fantastic. What an experience. I'd love it. It's just finding those opportunities, isn't it, really? It's knowing where to be and meeting the right people, being in the right place at the right time.
That's it. And, I get lots of people contacting me saying, I'd love to do what you do. I'd like to write, do a little bit of radio. How do I do it? And I say, if you're good enough, you'll be able to do it. The thing you need is luck. You've got to be in the right place at the right time.
It purely is that. It really is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I always say, don't ask for the fish, ask for the net to catch the fish with, and then you'll get somewhere.
Then you'll get somewhere. Yeah, precisely. Well, there's still hope for me yet then, Ed, in my later years.
Very much so, yes.
You never know. I might have my own show at some time. Someone pointed out to me many years ago, I was on the 1 hour show down on Radio Suffolk, Norfolk. Sorry, no, Radio Suffolk, BBC Radio Suffolk. And they listened to the show and they said to me the following day, I heard you're on the radio yesterday. It was a great show, that is. He said to me, you've got a voice, Russell, that would be perfect for that midnight sultry show, oozing out at midnight over the airwaves. And I thought that was quite a nice touch. But
I could see that, yes. Perhaps a slot from 11 till 2, playing some really smooth jazz,
yes.
A
jazz show would be perfect.
Something like that. Yeah, a little bit of weather report, some Cleo Lane maybe to liven people up. Yeah, that would work. I can see you doing that.
Yeah, there's hope. We'll see. We'll see what life brings. I always do that. Life's a journey, and it never ends until it ends, of course.
Absolutely.
But a bit like the show, really. As always, we could talk forever, Ed, because we can. I know we can.
You do that well. You've segued into the end of the show perfectly.
Oh, well, I'm getting a bit better at this stuff now these days. But this is just a 30 minutes or so intro into the world of Edward Couzens-Lake. So thank you, Ed, for coming onto the show and talking about your life. It's been a huge pleasure as always, and the pleasure as always is all mine. Always.
Thank you very much, and me too.
And we'll catch up very, very soon, I'm sure.
We will.
So the next episode on the World of Lord Russell podcast show is The Lion's King, where my special guest will be Brian King, the former Millwall player and Premier League scout for Tottenham Hotspurs Football Club, Everton Football Club and Aston Villa Football Club, where we talk about Brian's life in football as a player and as a scout. So until then, it's au revoir from him and au revoir from me.